All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I'm excited to present this work that I worked on with Oliver Haimson and Andalibi. So first, in talking about and thinking about distinguishing emotion AI, first we need to define what emotion AI is. And it is what it sounds like. It's a type of AI that claims the ability to infer how we're feeling subconsciously through assessing a variety of patterns and a variety of different data inputs. And so there are a bunch of data inputs that emotion AI might use to try to infer our emotions. So these are just some examples, like spoken words, digital communications, our facial expressions, the way that our eyes are moving, the way that we're using our devices. And then this then flows through an emotion AI system, which might send those emotion inferences that it generates to a variety of data recipients. So these are just some examples of the type of recipients who might be interested in the way that people are feeling. But there are some problems that have been identified by scholars with emotion AI. So scholars have questioned the technical accuracy and scientific validity of being able to sense what emotions people are feeling. People have argued that emotion AI is based on pseudoscientific assumptions. And of course, there are some ethical and privacy issues with trying to infer what people are feeling subconsciously. So since there are kind of these moving pieces of emotion AI with the inputs and the recipients and where it's flowing to, this study led really nicely to a contextual integrity approach. And so contextual integrity is a framework by Helen Nissenbaum which allows us to understand the appropriate flows of information dependent on different sorts of pieces, which I'll get into on the next slide. And so these are the different sorts of factors of contextual integrity that we can identify through emotion AI. And so we have the data inputs, which are the attributes that might change and how they flow to data recipients. Our subject is our person. Our subconscious feelings is sending it to us, sending it to the emotion AI. And then the transmission principle, which contextual integrity identifies, is kind of a question mark in the flow of emotion AI inferences because it's kind of a black box of how the rules that this emotion AI data follows. So we had a few research questions for this paper. First, we wanted to distinguish emotion AI from AI that doesn't infer emotion. Do people feel differently about this emotion-specific AI? And then we were wondering how US data subjects perceive the sensitivity of these various input data to emotion AI that we were just discussing. Specifically, we also wanted to see how these perceptions of sensitivity of input data might vary across gender, race, and disability status, since some minority groups might be disproportionately impacted by the bias that emotion AI might have. And then finally, we wanted to see how might US data subjects' perceptions of sensitivity differ across the recipients of emotion data. So we conducted a survey representative of the US population and oversampled for people of color, people with disabilities, and gender minorities. And so this was a survey again, so we asked people about their attitudes towards AI, and then about emotion AI, and then asked about their perceptions of sensitivity across a range of input data, which you'll see on the next slide, and emotion data recipients, which we'll go over as we go through the results. But first, we wanted to see if people felt differently about emotion AI than non-emotion AI. And we found that people had significantly more negative attitudes towards emotion AI than AI that did not detect emotion. So what does this mean? First, this extends on previous work that has built these conceptual distinctions between AI and emotion AI. And so our quantitative empirical results reflect this already conceptual kind of framework that emotion AI is distinct. And from this, we argue that policymakers should distinctively assess emotion AI within their broader AI governance initiatives as a specific issue. And this would align with the EU's current assessment of emotion AI in hiring as high risk. We found that data subjects in the US perceived all emotion AI input data as sensitive. So all of these numbers these are means that are out of 7. And so you can see that they're all pretty high, even the lowest mean. All of these being input data to emotion AI. And so we found some patterns in trying to interpret what these averages meant across the US public. And so we found the most sensitive was perceived to be precise location data, and the least sensitive was general environment, both kind of trying to infer emotions based on where you're going. And this showcases a desire for obscurity that people might have, in terms of they felt that it was a lot more sensitive for an emotion AI system to be collecting where exactly they're located as opposed to where they might generally be located, like a doctor's office, for example. We also see concerns around building emotion inference based on digital communications and spoken words. And so this showcases a desire for intellectual privacy, or the ability to communicate or search for information without fear of surveillance. And this is really important, as we see in emotion AI development that some developers see words as not sensitive, but people want their privacy of their words here. We see some patterns across the different sorts of racial, gender, and disability demographics that we looked at. And so here we see that white participants saw eye movements, non-facial biometrics, and the environment as significantly more sensitive than people of color. In terms of gender, we saw gender minorities seeing a variety of different data inputs as significantly more sensitive than cisgender men. And in terms of disability, we see disabled participants finding eye movement and non-facial biometrics as significantly more sensitive than people who did not have a disability. And so from this, we argue that, we echo a previous argument made by Hoffman that these concerns and arguments to be more inclusive with technology by including more minoritized individuals might not actually be inclusive in practice, as these individuals are not necessarily comfortable with particular types of data being collected in the first place. And finally, answering our third research question, we found that all recipients of emotion data were found to incur negative consequences. And so again, you see that the means out of 7 were relatively high, but we were able to extract some patterns from this. So you can see that people were most concerned about actors that had a high power asymmetry. So people like data brokers, future employers, government actors as recipients of emotion data were perceived as the most sensitive. And then the least sensitive, but still perceived as sensitive, were people like my friends and my family, people with a less power dynamic to others. And so there are some key takeaways from this paper that I want to leave you guys with. First is that people have significantly more negative attitudes towards emotion AI than AI. And so there needs to be a continued focus on emotion AI specifically, both in policymaking and in research, as this is distinct from larger discussions about AI. Second, people view all input data to emotion AI as sensitive. And finally, many fear negative consequences if their emotion data is shared, especially with powerful actors. So thank you so much, and happy to take any questions.